What's the news there with old Hercules?
Oh yeah, we got Mr. Sorbo is
Mr. Kevin Sorbo, dude. Speaking of dumb ideas, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm getting the page up right now on my computer, but Kevin Sorbo's a little upset about how there's persecution in Hollywood with Christians.
Yes.
And how, he didn't have any success with God's Not Dead. We all know that. He didn't make any money on that. So there's a lot of persecution in Hollywood of Christians.
Yeah, right. Because he didn't make any money on God's Not Dead. Right. Right.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I was gonna say they're very anti-Christian in their belief, I'm sure. This is by Michael W. Chapman. This is from CNS News, and it says Hercules actor, in quotes, being a Christian in Hollywood, you get attacked. Mm-hmm. And I'm just gonna go down to kind of the bread, the meat and potatoes of the whole entire thing. But he was having an interview. And he was telling them basically about what it's like to be a Christian in Hollywood. And Sorbo had said, I think being a conservative in Hollywood and being a Christian in Hollywood, you get attacked. Mm-hmm. It's so strange to me that the media sits there and protects the things that they protect, or they ignore the things that they ignore, and they go after stories like global warming. Like it's more important than what's going on in the world right now with these terrorists. So basically he's saying, hey, this whole warning about people dying later, people are dying now, kind of. I guess logically I get it, but very backwards way of thinking, Mr. Sorbo. And do Christians in Hollywood seriously get persecuted? I mean, is that a word that they're capable of using to describe the atmosphere around them? Because we know there's certain situations where persecution means a lot more.
Right. And it must be the only reason why his career didn't take off, because he's been such a devout Christian for so long.
Yeah.
At least since the making of Pool Boy. Pool Boy 2, yeah.
Pool Boy 2, the sequel to the movie that never happened.
Right.
Everyone, please check out Pool Boy. Let Kevin Sorbo know it's his best film. I think the worst thing about Kevin, it's not the worst thing, but the worst case for Kevin Sorbo is that his very best work is not filmed, or not many people know his very best work, which is indeed Pool Boy 2.
Right. And for people who don't know, okay, and let me say this first, man. I've been following this guy. I looked him up as you were talking. Bob Dutko. Bob Dutko, I think it's like Top 10 Proofs or something like that .com. He's a Christian apologist of some kind. He has a program. But he met Sorbo, and he was talking about Sorbo from God's Not Dead. Like the article here, Michael Chapman, he mentions Soul Surfer. Right, the movie about the girl the surfer who had the shark attack, lost her left arm in the shark attack, and he was in that. It was an inspirational movie. So they mentioned that, and interestingly enough, that movie, the Soul Surfer, that one happened before he did, in the same year, but before Pool Boy 2. And
the best movie made.
And so I posted on Bob Dutko's Facebook page, and I said in the comment section, because he had all these people who were like, "Oh, Sorbo's an amazing Christian. Oh, Sorbo's just so he's a real inspirational character, and we need more people like him." And they're all mentioning stuff that he'd been in. They mentioned Hercules, they mentioned Soul Surfer, they mentioned God's Not Dead, they mentioned the movie that's coming out, Let the Lion Roar, in which apparently he plays John Calvin, the 16th century Protestant theologian, John Calvin. They mention all those things, and they completely forget to mention Pool Boy 2. And Pool Boy 2 is borderline pornographic, right? He has the insinuation is that he has sex with the wife that he just tried to bring back to life after she was drowned by a Mexican gang guy.
Yeah, and it's a comedy. It's a comedy.
It's
a farce. It's a farce type comedy. But him driving with the arm buckled into the seat next to him in a pool van. That sort of comedy. Yeah.
Right. The old Lord, forgive me for what I'm about to do. That kind of thing. And borderline blasphemous. It was not even borderline. I don't know any conservative Christian who likes Sorbo and who likes Bob Dutko. I don't know a single one of those people in that thread, number one, that saw it, number two, that if they did, they would sit through the entire thing and be like, Kevin Sorbo, yeah, he's a real inspirational Christian character in Hollywood.
There's a talent.
there's a talent, yeah, no, not at all. Like,
Yeah.
So I posted there, and I said I would post a link, but I think it would offend the sensibilities of most of your readers. Nobody responded to that. A whole bunch, like you have all of these single line comments, and then you have this chunk of a comment that's mine talking about Pool Boy 2. Dude, nobody touched it. Nobody got near it.
Oh yeah, they forgot about it.
They're like, no, I don't know about that thing.
Don't you find it odd that people didn't think it's blasphemous that he pretended to be a different Greek god? Or do you think it's because people go, oh, well, Greek gods, those are obviously fake?
Right. And not even understanding arguably parallels between the Jesus myths and Hercules. And myths surrounding Hercules. Like, yeah, I think it's really strange. I think, and it would be hard. I mean, sure, Hercules was kind of family-oriented, but, dude, it was definitely an adult program, too.
Oh, sure.
The idea that it was like a Christian program or anything like that is just not even realistic.
How can you have a Greek god be a Christian program?
The whole thing gets me, though, whenever I hear stuff about this, and not just Sorbo, forget Sorbo for a second, this mantra that you hear from American Christians that they endure persecution, it offends me. Like, it really, like, it doesn't, not so much offends me, it just upsets me. It's like, get over it. Get real. Get real.
Well, how can you be a persecuted majority in terms of, that's not an apartheid, like you said that before, but how can you have a persecuted majority?
Apartheid.
The majority of people are religious, predominantly Christian in the United States. Still, how can you be persecuted? You are the majority. Your will is being done. I mean, it's one thing to consider another nation where Christianity is a minority sect, but those same forms of argument you can rationally use with any form of minority in a different sect. It's the question of being in America, in a first world country, where you say, I'm a persecuted Christian, and I'm just as persecuted as somebody else, when you're in the majority of people.
Right.
It's simply incorrect. And I cannot find an example where that is true, where you're an absolute persecuted majority that has the sway that Christianity has in our country.
You can't run for office hardly. In fact, I mean, there was one out in the open atheist in Congress, and he lost his re-election bid.
Yes.
I mean, it's not realistic at all. Like, I don't believe that Barack Obama is a Christian. I really don't even necessarily believe that Bill Clinton was a Christian, but I don't believe he was any more of a Christian or less of a Christian than George Washington was, or any of most of the founding fathers, for that matter. Mm-hmm. But the idea that persecution is this, real thing in the daily lives of most Christian people in the United States, it's absurd. I pass by. We live in Jerusalem, right? We live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Grand Rapids. I went to. It was like churchfinder.org or something.
Loaded.
Dude, we're talking just on that site alone. It was like one church for every, like, less than 500 people in the city. It was like for every 300 there was a church, something like that. And that was just on that website. And that had at least, and I listed out a number of the denominations that weren't listed on there that I know for a fact have churches in this area. And I said, and none of them, I don't know a single one of them that tell their parishioners, you might want to park your car a ways away from the church and dress up with a fake mustache and some glasses because the cops are looking for you, or
that's right.
the bad guys are just all going to come in and get you. I mean, it's just it's so radical. It's so radically unrealistic.
And they'll use of something happened to a Christian in a minority situation, like over in the Middle East, and they'll compare that to something like the war on Christmas.
Right.
Where they'll say that's somehow similar.
Right.
And that's not similar.
No.
That's not even close.
Right, because you've got the so-called war on Christmas, right, or the war on Easter, or war on St. Patrick's Day parade. You've got that kind of thing. But then you've got real persecution. This, I guess, is where it bothers me, because we live in a world where people really are persecuted for their beliefs in different places, around different places around the world. And Christians right now are a persecuted minority in Iraq Just throwing that one out there. Or in the Middle East, they're a persecuted minority in many places. There was an article, The Gospel Herald, and my cousin Dustin, I saw this on his wall on Facebook, and I checked it out. ISIS names Christians as #1 enemy as persecution escalates in the Middle East. And apparently, ISIS, they have a propaganda booklet, right, called Dabiq, if I'm pronouncing it right.
I believe so. Yeah, Dabiq.
Right. Yeah, Dabiq. And according to Arutz Sheva, the cover photo on the booklet is a photoshopped picture of the Vatican bearing the ISIS flag. Within the literature, the terror group reveals their desire to conquer Rome, defeat Christianity, and, quote, break the cross. Right? And so, and Christians living over there are literally fleeing for their lives, right? They are literally shaking in their boots, dude, like the prospect that these barbarians are at the gates, the reality that they're at the gates, is a terrifying thing. Those Christians over in those countries have to look at their children and try to reassure them in any way possible that they're going to do their best to be safe, and try to tell them what happens if we're not, and answer those questions to their children. What happens if ISIS shows up? What happens if they come to the door, Daddy, and they shoot you? What happens with this? That is real religious persecution. That's real. That's tangible and real. So when people like Sorbo get up there and say, well, in Hollywood, especially in a year like we've had here, the last year or 2 years, how many major Christian movies have been on the silver screen with packed out audiences of people, tons of people. When I went to God's Not Dead, I tried going with Ed Brayton of Free Thought Blogs and a couple friends from CFI, and I get in there, and I thought on a Thursday, I think it was a Thursday we went, I thought, it's a Thursday, it's been out for weeks, nobody's going to be in the building. Dude, I couldn't have been more wrong.
Yeah.
That theater was packed to the brim with people. There was hardly, I don't even know if there wasn't any open seats, because I got the last ticket. My friend and I, we got the last tickets. And you look at that and you say, so you're raking in the loot. You're going on shows, right, with Newsmax or Fox News or any of the other major shows, and you're saying you're a Christian, and what's happening to you, right? What's happening to all your Christian friends? What's happening to the churches all around? Are they experiencing anything remotely close to what Christians who are in countries overseas who are really honestly being persecuted? Are Christians here experiencing anything like that? And the answer is no. No. It's a definitive no way in hell, not never. And it upsets me. I'm visibly offended right now.
Well, and the other thing about persecution is the most persecuted religion, and I'm probably going to get guff for it, but I'll say it anyways. The most religiously persecuted group in the world are Muslims, people of the Islamic faith. Mm-hmm. Those are people who are ostracized and othered not only by their immediate social standards, but by countries outside of their own and nations outside of theirs that deem them a certain way based on their religious beliefs as well. And the bloodshed is clear. I mean, you want to talk about persecution, like we were talking about before the show. Be in Pakistan on a clear day and worry about a drone strike when you walk into school. And that's not just because there's bad people in Pakistan. Those people are being attacked because of religious belief. It is religious persecution. And if we're funneling this amount of money into wars like that, are we really going to war against terrorists, or are we going to war against a religion and a faith?
Mm-hmm. There was a part of this piece with at the Gospel Herald. What is it? Leah Klett, and she said something that just drove me up a wall. She was saying this, and she's partially right, and then maybe that's what upset me the most. She said this, and I'll just quote her. A little more than a decade ago, right, and maybe that's the key phrase there. A little more than a decade ago, 1.6 million Christians resided in Iraq. Mosul, the nation's second largest city, was home to 60,000 Christians who practiced their religion in the midst of their Muslim neighbors. However, over the past several months, and that's the kicker for me, that's what pisses me off. Over the past several months, ISIS has executed innumerable Christians throughout Iraq and Syria, or forced them to flee the country in an attempt to establish a caliphate. or Islamic State in the Middle East. There are no longer any Christians living in Mosul for the first time in 2,000 years, and the 100,000 remaining in the capital city of Baghdad live in constant fear for their lives as ISIS draws closer. That's so true and so wrong at the same time. I encourage our viewers, go back and try to find and look for articles that talk about Christian refugees as a result of our policies in Iraq and what Christianity was like under Saddam Hussein, what kinds of freedom of movement and speaking that they had, freedom of speech that they had under Saddam Hussein, and then look at how many fled because of what we unleashed in that area when we toppled Saddam Hussein. They were fleeing a long time ago. There were refugee crises going almost a decade ago, which is right there, a little more than a decade ago. There's a lot that's happened in that decade, including a war, right? Including a war against Iraq that resulted in this kind of a thing. I spoke about it when I was on PaleoRadio on WOCR in Olivet, Michigan. In fact, I'll find it. Maybe I can share it along with these videos here, where I talk specifically about the refugee problem and the people fleeing Iraq and how the Christian face of Iraq, how many Christians there were, how it was dramatically depleted well before ISIS was even a thought in the mind of even the people in ISIS. Maybe, I mean, like, this goes back a ways, and it upset me because it was used by Leah Klett as an opportunity to try to paint it as though this is the reason for the demise of Christians in Iraq, and that there was nothing really wrong before then. They enjoyed all this peace, and now this is what's going on, and was doing it to prop up the idea that we need to be more involved with military intervention. And it just, to me, I said that I have very little respect for what Leah Klett did. I would have had a great deal of respect for her if she just simply stuck to the story and wasn't using it as a tool to prop up the idea of military intervention in Iraq and Syria.
Yes, and I think there's a general misconception in America that people in the Middle East don't believe that America is fighting as Christians, which they do. When they see the U.S., that is Christianity over their head.
Right.
That's not just they don't think, oh, just the U.S. That is correlated with Christians and Christians coming to kill us. And so for the Christians that are on the ground in those areas, that becomes a very volatile and dangerous situation. So our actions in the Middle East, just like you're saying, was the precursor to this mass exodus of Christians out of the Middle East, because they were viewed as somewhat or correlationally responsible for what we were doing in their skies and through drone strikes and bombing and basically plundering their cities. And they were seeing that as a Christian activity, not the United States, but the United States operating as a front for Christianity to attack them. And so that is why we saw the mass exodus, not just because of what's going on in the past few months.
Right. And the whole idea, the propaganda booklet, Davik. Let's talk about this for a second.